Hello and welcome to the Japan Archives, a podcast where we'll be delving into the histories and mythologies from Japan's long history. I'm your host, Thomas.
And I'm your co-host, Heather. We'll also be reading a poem for you every week and giving a little history about the poet who wrote it. Ikimashou!
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Japan Archives, episode 33. We're back, at least for now. We found time to record together. Heather is still sat in the hospital though, but it's looking up. You should be out soon this weekend.
That is the current hope. So gotta wait for a couple things to be sure, but hopefully if tests and things are looking good, then maybe I can go. I can go home maybe.
So after our bonus episode and you were telling us how much you were enjoying the hospital experience, has it kind of worn off now? 3 weeks in the hospital bed?
Well, the nice thing is I don't have to stay in my bed. I have a couch in my room. I still haven't gotten roommates, so I've been really lucky for that. And I can walk around. I would like to get home, but it has been, as far as staying in the hospital has gone, I think it has gone pretty much the best I could have hoped for the long time I've been here. So, I mean, everyone here is so kind. They are so nice. They're really friendly, and people will just chat with me. So the only bad thing that's happened is that because of the coronavirus, they have restricted visiting hours. So like friends can't stop by, and the professor has to have shorter visits too. So that's not been fun.
I can imagine it is not fun. I'm glad everything's looking up and you can get back to your normal schedule again pretty soon.
Normalish. Normalish. How about you, Thomas? How are you?
Well, we're finally drawing towards the end of the school year now, which is good. So I have tomorrow to do and then Monday and Tuesday. Just 3 more days to go. Obviously, like I've said, the kids aren't there apart from a few dormitory students who haven't gone home. But yeah, I'm running out of things to do, but just gotta sit through the last 3 days and then I get a bit of the spring break. So it's all good on my end.
Excellent.
So, episode 33. Like we said in the previous episode, we wanted to do some stories on Japanese mirrors. So, I found 2 different stories that I was going to tell you today.
All right, let's go.
This first story takes us to a man. He was a sculptor known as Hidari Jingoro. As well as being a sculptor, we know that he was also a comedian, an actor, storyteller, and even a painter. So he was quite a skilled man all around. One of the interesting things of note about Jingoro-san is that he might not have actually existed and may have been completely fictitious. Some studies have suggested that he might have actually been active during the Edo period, but again, because there are the beliefs that he was completely fictitious, this might just be a general period that we think he was in. But if he didn't exist, then of course that is an educated assumption, I suppose.
Wasn't okay. So this is tickling a memory I have, and I could be really wrong. Wasn't there a theory at one point? Was it either Marlowe or Shakespeare that was possible? Some people said that it was not just one person, but many people. But it then became this one entity named as, like, was it Marlowe or Shakespeare? I think it was around that time period.
That is actually something I'm not too sure about, but I do know that similarly, like Homer and his Iliad, people think that potentially he was many people and not the one, and it was all these separate stories brought together to make this epic piece. But no, I've never heard of it for the other 2 guys, actually. So, a little bit more about the sculptor before we get into his story. What's also, I found of interest, perhaps, that obviously with him being thought of that he's actually just a fictitious character. When I started researching a little bit on the internet to see if I could find anything more about this person, the only 2 references I could find for him was a information board from a temple, and the only other reference aside from that was from the Mina no Nihongo so the Japanese learning textbook, where he's actually included in one of the lessons in the book. So, two very
Really?
strange areas to find this man referenced. As a sculptor, there are two things of note as well. The first one, actually, both of them do link back to older episodes. And once
Ooh.
again, I'm just going to say none of this was planned, but don't worry, this is not a Lake Biwa reference episode.
Aw.
And honestly, from now on, if Lake Biwa is going to be mentioned in episodes, I'm going to have to do a disclaimer, I think, because it keeps coming back to haunt us. Now, the first one is we have a carving of a sleeping cat,
Oh.
or in Japanese, as it's known as the Nemori Neko. There are several of these cat carvings found in temples around the area of Nikko, including the Nikko Toshogu Shrine, which we mentioned back in the Worms of Tente episode.
Hmm.
Of course, there is another Toshogu Shrine, which we talked about in Ueno Park. And at that temple as well, there are two carvings of dragons, which are also attributed to this sculptor. Finally, the second thing is that, according to legend at least, this man was so skilled in his craftsmanship that others grew insanely jealous of him. So they decided, in their infinite wisdom, that they would chop off his right arm. Luckily, though, Jingoro-san was actually left-handed, so he could actually carry on with his craft. And that is actually partly where he gets his first name from, of Hidari, as that means left in Japanese.
Yeah, now I'm remembering this story because when you mentioned the Hidari, I was like, ah, I didn't even think about his name being left. So it's kind of interesting how he became famous, but no one noticed that he was left-handed. So they just went on the assumption that he was right-handed.
Yeah, because presumably people would have known, because I don't know, at least in the West, like if you're left-handed,
Mm,
people know. Like it's
mm.
a thing that people will notice and they will tell other people, like, oh, you're left-handed. I know three other people who are left-handed. Like, apparently it's a fascinating fact. But maybe it's different in Japan. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if Japan also has like the historical aversion to left-handedness, like there used to be in the West. Or like things like in ancient Rome as well, like you had to be right-handed and things. It would be interesting to see if that was
Oh my
a belief
gosh.
in old-timey Japan.
It feels like a lifetime ago, back when I was not in the hospital. I was I was listening to a podcast about something about left-handedness and culture, but I don't believe they had mentioned Japanese. So Japanese cultures, other different world cultures, but it's actually quite a small percentage of the population that is left-handed. But yeah, if you have like a sports player, like left-handed pitcher, left-handed batter, but I don't know if in Japanese baseball they mention if he's left-handed, if the player's left-handed or not. So that is a really good question. So, but I was because yeah, you're right, because maybe they wouldn't have known because they don't comment about it. But in Western culture, we would have said, oh yeah, and he's left-handed.
Anyway, that was a little bit about Hidari Jingoro. So let us start with the first story. Mukashi mukashi, long, long ago, Hidari Jingoro was walking through the streets of Edo, going about his everyday life. Eventually, his chores finished and he began to return to his studio when he came across a strikingly beautiful woman on the streets of Edo. The woman didn't actually notice Hidari. She was also going about her normal day, unaware of the man whom she had caught the eyes of. Hidari noticed as he watched her that she was actually carrying a strikingly beautiful and shining mirror, and perhaps the woman may be distracted by the people, or perhaps because she had not fastened the mirror tight enough, she actually dropped it and unfortunately did not realize she had done so, and so carried on home without the mirror. Hidari, however, because he had been watching the woman the whole time, saw that she had dropped the mirror and went to retrieve it before finally returning to his studio. Now, the story I read didn't actually talk about whether he tried to find this woman to return the mirror. So maybe he did, maybe he didn't, or maybe he merely wanted to keep it for himself. It said that, struck by her beauty, he decided that his next piece that he was going to carve and make was going to be resembled around the woman that he had seen on the streets. And so he took up his tools and began to carve and chisel a statue, which, by the time he had finished, was actually an exact likeness of the woman he had seen. And upon completion, he placed the mirror and placed it onto the statue between the carved robes of it. Now, day after day, it said that the mirror reflected the beauty of the woman until one day it actually began to take within itself the essence of the woman itself, including her body and her soul. And due to all these strange circumstances, it actually caused the statue to come to life, much to the happiness of Hidari Jingoro. So a super short story, this one, about a mirror. I think it's interesting that it says like the mirror took on the soul of the woman, because obviously
Yeah.
the soul of the woman is actually not in the statue. So I'm a bit, it's a nice story, but it also confuses me a little.
Well, it's a little mildly creepy too in a way because he essentially then captured if he captured her actual soul, like what happened to the woman in her life? Did she die? Or was her like I wonder if it's a translation thing that didn't maybe soul is different than what we think of as soul is like was it split or did she die and then did she have memories of being in the other life? And what happened after she came to life? Did she just live with Hidari? Just kind of hang out? It's like, oh yeah, this is great. I'm in a studio. I have no idea what's going on. Sure, you're a nice guy.
Well, that's the thing. That's actually the story merely ends when the statue
Mm,
comes to life and it says that Hidari became an extremely happy man. It doesn't actually go into what happened next.
mm,
And obviously, perhaps like you say, it could be something to do with the translations of the Japanese into English, because the story as well does say that the mirror took within itself the essence of the woman. So
mm,
you would think in theory that it would be the statue that took in the essence of the woman as it was taking it from the mirror, which was originally owned by this nameless
mm,
woman from the streets. But in the story itself, it's been translated as the other way around. So how a statue that has no soul or essence within itself could then transfer itself into a mirror, which in theory already had the essence of the woman, I'm not really sure. But I still think it was an enjoyable story. Would that be the right word? I think it was definitely an intriguing story.
I mean, it's got like a romantic element to it, really, because yeah, I mean, definitely get that kind of element, like romantic as in not the meaning romantic where it's like that love, but that kind of idealized kind of story where it's like, oh, I'm lonely, and then this beautiful woman who I wanted to be with me is now with me. So not romantic as in love, but romantic idealized romance. So it's the two different meanings of romantic.
So, turning our attention to the second mirror story, this is the story of a priest known as Matsumura. Now, Matsumura is said to have been a Shinto priest who watched over a shrine by the name of Ogowachi Myojin, and sadly, over time, he'd been seeing it fall into decline and decay. So, in an attempt to fix this, he decided to journey all the way to Kyoto so that he could talk to the shogun at the time, hoping that he could get some money and restore it to its former glory. Now, he and his family stayed in Kyoto during this time in a particular house. This house apparently was thought to have been filled with bad luck, but Matsumura took no notice of this, even though many people had actually previously thrown themselves down the well located to the northeast side of his home in the direction of the Kimon. As we've said before, the northeast is the direction of the bad luck. Now, eventually, Kyoto fell on hard times and a drought actually plagued the city. Every well, far and wide, is said to have gone dry, all save the well at Matsumura's home. So desperate the people were that they actually came begging to the priest to ask if they could use this well, and through some strange turn of events, no matter how much water was drawn from this well, the well never actually ran dry. Sadly, however, one day a body was found in the well. The body was found by the maid of the priest. The priest came and checked the body and ruled out the death as suicide, but no one could actually figure out how this death had occurred. So Matsumoto went to again inspect the well and this time made a startling discovery. Now, what he saw was that the water seemed to be rocking from side to side as he stood there, until it eventually stopped, showing him a fair young woman beneath the water who was touching her lips with beni. Now, beni is an old form of Edo lipstick. She smiled through the water to the priest, who soon became overwhelmed by the need to throw himself into the water so that he may hold this enchanting woman that he could see before him. But of course, Matsumoto was a holy man, and he fought against the urge until he broke free. Quickly soon after, he had a fence built around the well, then instated a ban, meaning that people could no longer draw water from the well. Now, soon after the well had been surrounded by this fence, it said that the drought actually came to an end, and instead a torrential downpour then came to hit Kyoto, which lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. And also during this time, Kyoto was subjected to an earthquake. On the night of the 3rd day, a knock is said to have come to the priest's door, and prying it open, he saw the woman from the well stood before him. Now Matsumura rightfully refused this woman entry into his home, demanding to know if she was the reason for all the deaths surrounding the well. And it was then that she told the priest her tale. "My name is Yaoi," she said, "and it was not I, but the poison dragon. Never did I wish to lure those people to their deaths, but alas, the poison dragon bid me to do so. He forced me, all of this time against my will, to do this task for him. But now the gods have made him leave and go elsewhere, and now I am free of his service. The well now lies near empty. Please, if you would, find my body and take care of it, and you shall be rewarded." And with that said, her form disappeared in front of the priest. So Matsumura did not go to the well immediately, and he waited until the following day to begin the search, instructing some well cleaners in the area to search it for him. And in doing so, they came across several hair ornaments, but in addition to this, they also found a very old metal mirror. Now, the priest had always been a very wise man and decided to keep the mirror and even cleaned it himself, hoping to find answers upon it. And sure enough, he actually did. He found several characters written on the back, now mostly unreadable, but there were some that he could still make out. For instance, he could see written the 3rd month, the 3rd day, or Yaoi as it is pronounced in Old Japan. So the priest quickly realized that it was likely that he had been visited by the very soul of the mirror the previous night, the woman's name being the same one as that he saw on the mirror. So Matsumura took great care of this item as Yaoi had instructed, even going so far as to re-silver and polish it before laying it inside a box that he had made especially for it. And from then on, it said that he kept it safe in his home. So eventually one night, he's resting, and on this night Yayoi once more showed herself to him, and this time she regained him with her tale. "Indeed, I am the soul of the mirror," she said, "once owned by Lady Kamo, until I became an heirloom of the Fujiwara clan. I was cared for a time until the Minamoto and Taira clan began their fighting, when I was then thrown into the well and forgotten. It was then the poison dragon found me and made me do his bidding, until you freed me. If you could, please give me to the shogun, Lord Yoshimasa. He descends from those who once owned me. If you could do so, I believe you will be richly rewarded. But you have to leave immediately. A storm is coming that is going to wash away your home." And so Matsumura left immediately, as he had been told to do so, watching his home be washed away soon after. And it said that presenting the mirror and the story behind it to the shogun, he found the man greatly pleased, and so he gifted the priest with not just gifts, but enough money to see that his temple of Ogawa Machi Myojin could be restored to its former self. So this one was a little bit longer, and I kind of like this one. It seems at least this is what I get from the plot. Like
Hmm.
the background story of him wanting to restore his temple, like it feels almost jammed in there when it doesn't need to be. Like when I read the story when he's at his house and the story of the dragon and finding the mirror, I almost forget the reason why he's actually come to Kyoto until at the end when it's like, oh yeah, the shogun then gave him money for his temple. And then I remembered the reason he came. Like I honestly forgot.
Ah, yeah, there's a lot going on. Well, I think it's kind of a nice element. So, I mean, I think it's probably not needed, but he did move to a specific location for a specific reason. So, I mean, you could already have him in the area. So it's almost like a prologue and an epilogue kind of feel to it. So, I mean, it makes the story a little more complex, but is it necessary? I don't know. I mean, would he have been in Kyoto otherwise? So he had to get to Kyoto somehow. I mean, I could see this being, instead of being like a TV show plot, it would be like a movie plot. So like a longer story. But I mean, I like this one. The only thing I do have a question about is, what about his family? Were they still in the house when the house washed away? I'm hoping that his family and servants all survived.
That's true as well. Like, he leaves the house himself. Apart from the initial mentioning of the story of his family and his maidservant, they are never mentioned again. So whether they're forgotten in the story by whoever wrote this tale, or they'd already left by this point,
Hmm.
I'm not sure. Because it also doesn't say how long he was in Kyoto overall.
Ah, that's true.
Because we know he was there for the 3 days and 3 nights following the storm, but prior to that, we have no timeline.
Well, let's go on the assumption that his family was safe. Maybe they had returned back. If there was a drought in the whole area, maybe they had returned back to their previous home and he just stayed behind to try to earn money for his temple.
I also think it's interesting that this one is, again, it's showing that, oh no, I guess this one is slightly different for the first one in that the mirror gained its own soul from being owned and cared for by a family. It didn't actually take the essence of something
Hmm.
and become like a copy of something. It became an original soul in a way.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That is it's a really interesting element. I feel like if we look more into mirrors, I feel like we'd probably run into more stories with kind of a similar idea to them, either taking a soul or becoming a soul.
But there you have it. They're my two stories for today.
I like how you got two different stories with two different kind of different plot lines, differing stories. So two stories about mirrors, but different ideas from them, but still tied together is the mirrors having or acquiring souls. So two different, well, more romanticized story versus a kind of more of a like a story with a like a very like a pleasant ending where the mirror is restored to the family as well as the priest getting his temple.
So anyway, yes, there are my two stories for today. So if you are ready, Heather, is it time to head over to the literary corner?
It is indeed, dear sir. So I had intended several weeks ago now to talk about the Sakura Song. And so I am going to revisit that. However, because I was able to get my recording equipment in the hospital rooms. This is great. But I am a little bit embarrassed to sing the song in my hospital room. I don't know if anyone could hear me or not, but today I am just going to read the Sakura song for you. And then when I get back home, I'll record the song version for a bonus episode in the future. But today I will be reading the Sakura song. So Thomas, let me just ask you, since we were intending to record in February, but it is now about mid-March, what do you think is a highlight of the mid-March season?
If I had to guess, I would say the blossoms that are starting at this time. In Japan, obviously, people normally come for the cherry blossoms, but around this time as well, there's a lot of plum trees that Japan has, and the plum trees tend to blossom slightly earlier than the cherry blossoms, and they're normally like a white or even like a dark, almost purple, as opposed to like the light pink cherry blossoms. So I'd say blossoms, and it applies to both kinds of trees in this instance.
Well, yeah, you're right. The plum blossoms have blossoms, and I think they've kind of started dying out. So I missed all the plums. But the sakura or cherry blossoms should be starting. I think they're actually forecasted to start a little early this year. There's actually a website where you can go and see the cherry blossom forecast. So the different regions of Japan when the peak beauteous season, or the peak beauty of the cherry blossoms will appear. I'm curious to see about March. And well, because of the coronavirus too, they're discouraging hanami or cherry blossom viewing, where you go and sit all together on a blanket outside and eat and drink and watch the cherry blossom. So this year there should not be hanami or people sitting 6 feet apart under the cherry trees.
I guess it's kind of a shame. It's always nice to go to like Ueno Park during the Hanami and see all the groups of people
Mm.
relaxing, drinking, eating under the cherry blossoms. But I guess, of course, right now, not worth the risk.
I think you'll probably still see some people doing it, but maybe this year you should you'll still be able to go and see them, but you probably won't see the big groups, which are kind of fun to run across the people who are just like really happy and laughing and sometimes really loud. But cherry blossoms themselves are one of the biggest iconic symbols of Japan, along with like Mount Fuji, the Japanese flag, and also cats. Cats seem to be a really big symbol of Japan. So cherry blossoms do typically bloom in the spring, and they're seen as a symbol of new life and beauty and new beginnings. They are also seen as an illustration to the shortness of life, the shortness of youth, and the shortness of beauty. They only bloom for about a week or so, and then the blossoms slowly drift away from the tree to reveal the green leaves beneath. Cherry blossoms also symbolize the end and beginning of the Japanese school year. So, like you said, a lot. I think actually pretty much almost all schools have a cherry tree somewhere on their property. And a very popular thing is to have either like your end of school year pictures or your beginning of school year pictures underneath those cherry trees. If you or your graduation pictures, depending if it was an early blooming year. And so cherry blossoms are a symbol of change and evoke really strong emotions in many people, especially in Japanese people, because it does have that ending and beginning of the school year, which is a really emotional time because as you graduate, you go to different schools and you might say goodbye to friends. So it's a end and a beginning. So cherry blossoms really have a big importance in Japanese culture. Sakura is the Japanese word for cherry blossom. They occur several times in poetry and symbolism, but I am going to focus today on the Sakura Song. And I wrote in my previous notes several weeks ago, if you happen to go to an hanami, you can sing it, but considering this year there won't be, you could go sing by yourself 6 feet away from other people underneath a cherry tree if you so desire, with your mask on your face. The melody of this folk song is a traditional Japanese folk song. It originates from the Edo period, and you have probably heard this song before in instrumental form. It's been used in a lot of songs, and I even looked for and saw a reference to its use in a John Bon Jovi song called Tokyo Road, which I am not familiar with that particular song from John Bon Jovi.
I actually had listened to it after I read your notes,
Oh, oh,
and
you did?
I did. And it took a while to find it because
Hmm.
a lot of the more modern versions don't have it in it. But basically, the verse that you're gonna say, they kind of it's like a voiceover at the beginning of the song,
Hmm.
and
Ah.
then the song itself actually starts. So it's not incorporated into the song, it's actually just a placeholder at the start, at
Hmm.
least from the one version I found on YouTube and listened to.
Oh, I like that. So that's one particular instance, but it's been used in movies and shows as background music, based for shows that are based in Japan. And we're going to go into a little bit of music theory. And I studied a little bit of music in college, but I know I have a friend who listens who's a really good music major. So if she listens to this and she feels free to correct me, please correct me. But the song uses a pentatonic scale called the In scale. And this particular scale actually is named the Sakura pentatonic scale. This scale is used for the koto and the shamisen, which are traditional Japanese instruments. And Thomas, I feel like you're familiar with either one or both of these.
So the only thing I know really of interest about the at least the shamisen is that as they've tried to modernize it and think of better ways that they could make it that are more ethical, they've tried other various things. But unfortunately, for it to still have the original traditional sound of the shamisen, the only way to achieve it is to carry on the traditional manufacturing process, which is actually involved using cat skins. And obviously, cat skins products are kind of falling out of favor now. Like the shamisen industry, at least, is in a bit of a crisis right now because to get the traditional sounds, you still need to use cat skin.
So the koto is similar. Just gonna just walk right into the next subject. The koto is similar. Oh, the poor cats. Oh my gosh. When you hear the shamisen, you go, oh, it's kind of a you don't really want to think about. But okay, anyway, the koto is similar to a harp. It has strings that you can pluck, and you actually wear these little. I think it's like a shell, almost like little rings you put on like little shells, and you pluck the strings with the shells. And the shamisen is similar to a guitar shape, and it's played with a special paddle. And you'll see the shamisen a lot, I think, in kabuki. Now, the lyrics were added during the Meiji period. Hang on, help me with my jidai. We have Edo and Meiji. Which came first?
Which came first? So the
Hmm.
Edo period came first, and then it was immediately followed by the Meiji period, because that was the
Okay.
time during the Meiji restoration when Japan was like reopening up to the West.
So the lyrics were added during that period. So previously the melody was created and then the lyrics were added later. I'm going to try to read through these and try not to sing them because I just don't want to sing in the hospital. I feel like I might have someone kind of come in and look and let me like I'm very strange. And I feel like you might be able to pick out some of these words or several of these words. So I'm going to go ahead and read through them whenever you're ready.
I am ready when you are.
Sakura, Sakura, Yayoi no sora wa miwatasu kagiri, kasumi ka kumo ka, nyoi zo izuru, izaya, izaya, mini yukan.
So I think it's safe to say I heard Sakura from the very get-go. Other words, it sounded like you started off the second line saying Yayoi. I'm going to assume it means something different than the Yayoi from the Mirror story, as in like hers was used in the context of third day, third month kind of thing.
Ooh,
Or you're thinking it might be something similar?
Now I'm kind of wondering. I gotta look at the kanji
In like
themselves.
relation to spring, because obviously if you read the line, it's Yayoi no sora wa
Mm,
across the spring sky. So Yayoi could be being used as a word for spring.
it could because if it's like well, during the Edo, I'm assuming they would still have like it's older Japanese.
And the only other things I'm pretty sure I heard was kumo, as in clouds, and I think I heard sora, as in sky.
You did hear those words. There's one word. If I bet if I say it by itself, I bet you know what it is. Nyoi.
Smelling the fragrance of the blossoms.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay, I see, I see. So overall, what would the English be then for this?
Cherry blossoms across the spring sky, as far as the eye can see. Is it mist or is it clouds? Fragrance in the air. Come now, let's go and see them.
That's quite sweet.
And yeah, because they do look like when you see so many of them together, it does almost look like clouds or mist, or it's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, if people have never experienced a cherry blossom viewing, if you've only seen the pictures online, I would definitely recommend Ueno Park as one of the big recommendations for cherry blossom viewings.
If you can't make it to Japan and when you can travel again, because right now it's a little bit precautions. In Washington, D.C., there are cherry blossoms as well. And I believe from my recollection is they are trees from Japan. I think they were given as a gift several years ago. So if you are close to Washington, you could journey to see the cherry blossoms in America, but maybe not right now.
Maybe not right now.
One more thing about the Sakura Song. In 1941, the Ministry of Education added another verse, which then became the first verse of the song. So the original lyrics were then relegated to the second verse. But I chose to just give you the lyrics of the original first verse, which is now the second verse. So, do you have anything else you wanted to say? Any questions?
No, I don't think so, actually.
Well, then that is my segment for today. And back to you, Thomas.
Okay, well, thank you for the song. We want to quickly start doing something different before we sign off. One of our listeners actually suggested that we do like book recommendations and things. So, today's book recommendation, at least to start us off, it's more of a generic history of Japan. If you want something like quick and easy to give you an overview, I would recommend a book by Mikiso Hane. And the book is entitled Japan, A Short History. So that is my first recommendation. It's a good way to get a brief overview of Japan and also give you some ideas of other bits you might be more interested in, and it can point you in the right direction for future research.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Thomas, for that recommendation.
So with my story out the way, with Heather's story out the way, and with our book recommendation out the way, that is at least everything from me for today, unless you have anything else to add, Heather.
Probably like 50 billion other things to add, but for right now, everyone please take care, and thank you so much for your patience as we worked to bring you guys a new episode, and thank you so much for staying with us. We really appreciate it.
Well, with any luck, like you said, you'll be out of the hospital and we can get back to our normal Fridays every week. In regards to the next episode, at least, I guess we should tell them what we will be doing, and that will be finally bringing together everything we previously talked about before about the Oni, and as well as expanding on that, so talking about their origins, histories, appearances, and maybe a few more Oni stories. So yeah, that will be our main subject for next week, guys. So until then, that's everything from me.
Me too.
So speak to you next week, guys. Mata ne.
Mata ne.
If you've enjoyed the Japan archives, please consider checking out historyofjapan.co.uk, a database we are making on Japanese history. You can also find the show notes for all our episodes here. If you're on Instagram, you can follow my account over at nexus_travels, that's NEXUS_travels.
We also have a Facebook and Twitter page, which you can find at Japan Archives. If you're interested in little slices of life in Japan, be sure to check out my website over at heatheroveryonder.com. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed the episode. And if you have any suggestions for future episodes, have anything you'd love to hear about, head on over to historyofjapan.co.uk and send us a message.
If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to give us a rating and review over on iTunes. Thank you again for listening, guys. Until next time, bye.
Mata ne!